Well, shit. So, howdy. My landlord has decided to be a little bit of a jerk about the whole car thing. He's saying that since, well, he didn't say this, but basically, since he can't cut the grass without smashing people's windows, he smashed one of my neighbor's windows too. So he got two windows in one day. My insurance won't take care of it. I'm hoping his insurance covers it, but either way, he's supposed to pay for it because he's the one who fucked it up. But he's saying since he's got a, or since apparently he can't cut the grass without smashing people's windows, he's saying we have to cut our own grass now in this big ass fucking trailer park with all the extra land and grass around it. We have to cut all this fucking grass. And a month ago, he just made me get rid of all my lawn equipment. So how am I supposed to cut the grass when he just made me get rid of all my fucking lawn equipment? What a fucking nightmare. So anyways, good morning, I guess. I don't know what the fuck to do now. I found maybe one listing for a fucking place that'll do me any good. In case I have to move out of here. If I have to move out of here, I certainly can't take anything with me. So I can't fucking lift half of this shit. Our fucking antique table from New Zealand that I inherited from my mom is gonna have to just stay here and get thrown away. It's just not feasible. So I just gotta put up with him being a dick. Basically. Hi, Mr. Conway. So, I can't drive anywhere because fucking glass will go in my face. Waiting on the Safe Light people, or waiting on him to say he scheduled the Safe Light people. He said he's gonna send somebody out, but I'm waiting on just to hear back from him when he's gonna do it, or when they're coming. I had every intention of going out last night. Hey, Karma. If I had a clear bin bag, I might do that. Problem is, I don't even have a vacuum that's capable of getting that shit out of there. I have this cheap little vacuum that just won't work for that. Like, I need the glass people to come out just to be able to fucking drive the car. So Karma, like when you get down here, maybe we should save up to move instead of trying to fix this fucking place. I gotta figure something out. Maybe we can pay somebody. Maybe we can pay somebody to cut the grass for us or something. I don't fucking know. I just gave away all my fucking shit, all my lawn equipment. I had a gas weed eater that needed repairing. All I got left is an electric weed eater and a push mower that doesn't work. I think I just need gas in the push mower, but I'm not sure. It hasn't started for a hot minute. Oh, fuck. So I woke up shortly after you messaged me last night, Karma, and I haven't been back to sleep since. And now I have even less fucking food to eat because I can't even go to the grocery store. Got nothing to drink. Apparently I need to shave. So yeah, I'm fucking stressed out, man. I'm wondering if he's still gonna fix the AC now that he's gonna pay for this shit. The AC guy didn't come yesterday. My fucking bedroom's already hot as hell. So I had to give up trying to sleep in there. I fucking relapsed last night. I really wish I didn't relapse last night. Not that even getting a job at this point is gonna do me any good, or getting a better job. I found one place for rent for the same price in Clinton, which is north of here, even more out in the country. But it's a nicer place, that's for sure. I don't know how the hell I'm gonna move. I can't afford a U-Haul, that's for sure. And I can fucking barely lift anything I have anyways. Like, I sure as hell did not move all this stuff in here by myself, okay? We had people coming in here fucking helping us. And I don't have those same people to help me this time. Because they were my mom's friends. And my mom is dead. So... I'll feed my animals right quick. One thing I can fucking do right. So as y'all can see, I found myself a good woman here. She wants to actually help with stuff, as opposed to sitting and bitching about stuff. And reconnecting. We're back, okay. Fucking, the new med I'm on is making me want to eat more. Which again really sucks right now because I can't go to the grocery store because I can't drive my car because there's fucking broken glass all inside of it. And again, I don't have a vacuum that can get that shit out. I need the glass people to come take care of this shit for me. It's not like I should have to clean that shit up myself anyways. He's supposed to take care of it, so I'm waiting on him to take care of it. Waiting on a message back from him on when the fucking glass people are gonna be here. And I told him, I sent him a message saying, you know, if y'all would cut the grass clockwise instead of counterclockwise, kicking up all the rocks right at the cars, this probably wouldn't happen. And he didn't say nothing back to that shit. Hope I didn't piss him off by overstating the obvious. Anyways, thanks for joining me. We got 4 viewers. How about that? Anybody want to click the like button? Huh? You can go lay down. Alright, so we're having Pop-Tarts and water. Just got a phone call from a debt collector wanting to talk to my wife. Apparently she can get a brand new truck, but you can't pay off her payday loan. Anybody still here? Sorry about the delay. Got a phone call. Somebody came back. So yeah, cash to you. Trying to find my wife. Soon to be ex-wife. Whatever. Told him I can't help you. Because you don't talk to me. Left me for another man. Took the fuck off. I wouldn't know how to contact her if I tried. We've got some news today, though. Robert Mueller has made a statement. You want to listen to that? Let's listen to that right quick. The mythical figure.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. 2 years ago, the acting Attorney General,
Of course, the volume's way down.
asked me to serve as special counsel.
Let's see if I can get it with volume.
Between the Trump campaign and Russia. Let's listen now.
2 years ago, the acting Attorney General asked me to serve as special counsel, and he created the special counsel's office. The appointment order directed the office to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. This included investigating any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Now, I have not spoken publicly during our investigation. I'm speaking out today because our investigation is complete. The Attorney General has made the report on our investigation largely public. We are formally closing the special counsel's office, and as well, I'm resigning from the Department of Justice to return to private life. I'll make a few remarks about the results of our work. But beyond these few remarks, it is important that the office's written work speak for itself. Let me begin where the appointment order begins, and that is interference in the 2016 presidential election. As alleged by the grand jury in an indictment, Russian intelligence officers who were part of the Russian military launched a concerted attack on our political system. The indictment alleges that they use sophisticated cyber techniques to hack into computers and networks used by the Clinton campaign. They stole private information and then released that information through fake online identities and through the organization WikiLeaks. The releases were designed and timed to interfere with our election and to damage a presidential candidate. And at the same time, as the grand jury alleged in a separate indictment, a private Russian entity engaged in a social media operation where Russian citizens posed as Americans in order to influence an election. These indictments contain allegations, and we are not commenting on the guilt or the innocence of any specific defendant. Every defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. The indictments allege, and the other activities in our report describe, efforts to interfere in our political system. They needed to be investigated and understood, and that is among the reasons why the Department of Justice established our office. That is also a reason we investigated efforts to obstruct the investigation. The matters we investigated were of paramount importance. It was critical for us to obtain full and accurate information from every person we questioned. When a subject of an investigation obstructs that investigation or lies to investigators, it strikes at the core of the government's effort to find the truth and hold wrongdoers accountable. Let me say a word about the report. The report has two parts, addressing the two main issues we were asked to investigate. The first volume of the report details numerous efforts emanating from Russia to influence the election.
Can you hear it? Okay.
This volume includes a discussion of the Trump campaign's response to this activity, as well as our conclusion that there was insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy. And in the second volume, the report describes the results and analysis of our obstruction of justice investigation involving the president. The order appointing me special counsel authorized us to investigate actions that could obstruct the investigation. We conducted that investigation, and we kept the office of the acting attorney general apprised of the progress of our work. And as set forth in the report, after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited. The special counsel's office is part of the Department of Justice, and by regulation, it was bound by that department policy. Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider. The department's written opinion explaining the policy makes several important points.
If you didn't commit a crime, we would have said
further
so.
informed our handling of the obstruction investigation. Those points are summarized in our report, and I will describe two of them for you. First, the opinion explicitly permits the investigation of a sitting president because it is important to preserve evidence while memories are fresh and documents available. Among other things, that evidence could be used if there were co-conspirators who could be charged now. And second, the opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. And beyond department policy, we were guided by principles of fairness. It would be unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge. So that was Justice Department policy. Those were the principles under which we operated, And from them, we concluded that we would not reach a determination, one way or the other, about whether the president committed a crime. That is the office's final position, and we will not comment on any other conclusions or hypotheticals about the president. We conducted an independent criminal investigation and reported the results to the Attorney General, as required by department regulations. The Attorney General then concluded that it was appropriate to provide our report to Congress and to the American people. At one point in time, I requested that certain portions of the report be released. The Attorney General preferred to make the entire report public all at once. And we appreciate that the Attorney General made the report largely public, and I certainly do not question the Attorney General's good faith in that decision. Now, I hope and expect this to be the only time that I will speak to you in this matter. I am making that decision myself. No one has told me whether I can or should testify or speak further about this matter. There has been discussion about an appearance before Congress. Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report. It contains our findings and analysis and the reasons for the decisions we made. We chose those words carefully, and the work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony. I would not provide information beyond that which is already public in any appearance before Congress. In addition, access to our underlying work product is being decided in a process that does not involve our office. So beyond what I've said here today and what is contained in our written work, I do not believe it is appropriate for me to speak further about the investigation or to comment on the actions of the Justice Department or Congress. And it's for that reason I will not be taking questions today as well. Now, before I step away, I want to thank the attorneys, the FBI agents, the analysts, the professional staff who helped us conduct this investigation in a fair and independent manner. These individuals, who spent nearly 2 years with the Special Counsel's office, were of the highest integrity. And I will close by reiterating the central allegation of our indictments, that there were multiple, systematic efforts to interfere in our election. And that allegation deserves the attention of every American. Thank you for being here today.
Well, he didn't say anything about no collusion. He just said insufficient evidence to charge a conspiracy. He didn't say no obstruction. He said that he was not allowed to charge obstruction. So, yeah. Congress, do your job. Otherwise, basically what he's saying is Trump will get charged when he gets out of office if Congress doesn't charge him in the meantime. Anyways, back to life, back to reality, back to me not knowing what the fuck to do with myself. God damn, man, now I can't even drive anywhere. Karma, are you still there? Who's still here? Anybody chatted already? Anyways. So I guess I'm still waiting and hoping on my landlord actually fucking coming through on this window repair. I told him without my car I can't pick up rent. You know? I don't know what the fuck to do other than just wait on his ass. All I really can do is just wait, right? Just fucking wait. He said he was going to. He asked me for the make and model of the car. Told him 93 Accord, 4-door. I haven't heard shit back yet. Anyway, somebody talk to me. I'm not tired, but I want to go back to sleep. Because fucking bullshit. There's too much bullshit. Taking my anxiety meds, but they're not helping that much. I suppose, like, you know, like the physical sensation of twitching and shaking and being overwhelmed physically. That's not really happening, but doesn't exactly change the situation I'm in. I sure as hell didn't get to go out and have some coffee like Mr. Conway said. When I went out to check my car, or when I went out to go take a trip, that's when I found my fucking window was broken. It got broke the day before, though. I just didn't notice because I hadn't gone outside all fucking day. So I didn't notice until the next day, but the landlord didn't say nothing about that. He was just saying that he doesn't have to cut the grass anymore, so we all have to cut our own grass, even though he made me give away all my damn lawn equipment. So now I got a choice between trying to hire somebody to cut the grass for me every month, or trying to buy back my lawn equipment from the guy I sold it to. And neither one of those sound like very good options to me. It'd be nice if he just came to his senses and stopped being a jerk. But that doesn't seem bloody likely. Somebody talk to me. Anybody still here that can chat? Thanks for the 2 likes. Guess I'll put on some wall-to-wall coverage of the shit.
For every home project, HomeAdvisor finds trusted local pros. For every pro, you can...
Asked me to serve as special counsel, and he created the special counsel's office. The appointment order directed the office to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. This included investigating any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Now, I have not spoken publicly during our investigation. I'm speaking out today because our investigation is complete. The Attorney General has made the report on our investigation largely public. We are formally closing the special counsel's office, and as well, I'm resigning from the Department of Justice to return to private life. I'll make a few remarks about the results of our work, but beyond these few remarks, it is important.
Since we just heard that, I'm going to go ahead and skip it.
Thank you for being here today. Sir, if you're subpoenaed, no question.
Man said no questions.
Roughly 9 minutes from special counsel.
Of course, they're going to try to ask
Mueller,
more
and in that 9 minutes, there were a number of headlines. The special counsel saying, quote, "If we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so." Bob Mueller also leading folks to believe that the statement that he made there would serve as his testimony if he were called in to the House Judiciary Committee or a Senate committee as well. We are joined now by quite the panel. NBC News National Security and Justice reporter Julia Ainsley. She's live at the Justice Department. I also have MSNBC Justice and Security analyst and former chief spokesman for the Justice Department, Matt Miller, is back with me. Mimi Rocha, former assistant U.S. attorney and an MSNBC legal analyst. Former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner. He worked with Bob Mueller in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office for 2 years, and of course our chief legal correspondent, Ori Melber, who watched and listened, as we heard from Robert Mueller there, who is said he's speaking out because his work is done. He's resigning now. He's returning to private life. Let's start with the top lines here, Mr. Melber. What struck you most?
On the scene, this was vintage Bob Mueller. No questions, no bull. And just laying out what he's already laid out in the report. He basically quoted the key highlights from this report, and in so doing, I think a fair reading of what he said would rebut the White House and parts of what his boss, Bill Barr, have said about him. But then he went out of his way to say he doesn't question the, quote, good faith of Attorney General Bill Barr, his boss. That is huge, because Democrats in Congress have tried to line up an attack on Barr as the front edge of their allegations against what they call a corrupt Trump administration and its attempts to obstruct. Mr. Mueller just brushed that back. He also did something else that may be disappointing to people, and Congress will make its own determination whether to demand his public testimony. But he basically said, if you make me talk, I'm going to read you back this report, and that's it. He said it more artfully than that, but what he's telling the nation is, if you really want to know what we think and what we found, please read the whole report. And Congress, don't turn me into a prop. I won't have it. A final point on indicting the president, which is a big deal. Yeah. Mr. Mueller just said something that is as big a piece of news today as it was when it came out in the report, which is that he found substantial evidence that the president tried to obstruct justice, that he wasn't able to state that he didn't commit a crime. Whoa. And that the rules say if you want to deal with that, you do it through the Congress, aka the I word, not a sitting prosecutor. If there was any doubt or people needed to hear it from Mueller himself, and there's value to hearing from him, he just told America this kicks right back to Congress. You do something or you don't. That's what the Constitution says when it comes to potential high crimes and misdemeanors by the sitting president.
He also, Mimi Rocha, he also once again cited this long-standing policy of the Justice Department that prohibits charging a sitting president with a crime.
Yeah, look, I think Mueller made as clear today as he possibly could, perhaps without saying it in exactly the way some would, want him to have said it more explicitly, that he did not charge Trump with a crime because he could not, because of that policy. As Ari just said, I think Mueller made clear in the report, and today what he chose to highlight was that there was evidence and that this policy is what prevented him from stating that he would have charged him with a crime. I thought it was interesting that Mueller said, I'm not going to respond to hypotheticals. Quite frankly, I think the hypothetical he's talking about is this hypothetical that many, nearly 1,000 former federal prosecutors have signed on to, which is if Trump were president, he would have been charged with a crime. Mueller is not going to answer that question in the way that I think, we did in that statement, that we said he would be charged with a crime and convicted of that crime, but Mueller said it today in his own way. And just one other thing I want to point out that Mueller said, he really highlighted the importance of the obstruction of justice investigation. He talked about how obstruction crimes strike at the core of our justice system and our democracy. I think that's important. I think he's saying don't lose sight of this. This is the fact that we're talking about obstruction of justice and the president should not go unattended to. It is at the heart of everything that our justice system and our democracy is about. I think he's calling attention to that. And I also think it's important that he praised the integrity of the prosecutors and investigators who worked with him. We don't hear that often enough from the Department of Justice, but you heard it from Mueller today.
Just a quick reminder here from one of the top lines. This is certainly one of the sound bites that's probably going to be getting a great deal of attention from Robert Mueller. This is what he said just a few moments ago as it related to evidence against the president. Take a listen.
We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. That is unconstitutional. Even if the charge is kept under seal and hidden from public view, that too is prohibited. The special counsel's office is part of the Department of Justice, and by regulation, it was bound by that department policy. Charging the president with a crime was therefore not an option we could consider.
It sounds like, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, Glenn, it sounds like the special counsel is very much leaving open the possibility that once President Trump leaves office, there could very well be some sort of indictment.
Absolutely agree with you, Craig, and I think in the near term, what he's also saying, and this was one of my top line takeaways, after he said, I am not permitted to indict the president, he went on to say, that requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a president of wrongdoing. You don't need to be Rand McNally to see that roadmap. He was virtually announcing, Congress, do your job.
Right.
Also joined now by, once again, rejoined, I should say, Barbara McQueen is with me, and so is Frank Figliuzzi. Frank, another top line, and Bob Mueller saved this to the end, perhaps wanting to remind all of us, the biggest takeaway here, one of the biggest takeaways, the fact that the Russians tried on numerous occasions. In fact, I think we have the sound. Let's take a listen.
It is important that the office's written work speak for itself. Let me begin where the appointment order begins, and that is interference in the 2016 presidential election. As alleged by the grand jury in an indictment, Russian intelligence officers who were part of the Russian military launched a concerted attack on our political system. The indictment alleges that they used sophisticated cyber techniques to hack into computers and networks used by the Clinton campaign. They stole private information and then released that information through fake online identities and through the organization WikiLeaks. The releases were designed and timed to interfere with our election and to damage a presidential candidate.
Frank, it sounds like Bob Mueller is challenging Congress, challenging the White House, and challenging all of us to remember precisely what it is that the Russians did.
Bob Mueller decided to open his statement with the Russian problem, and he decided to end his statement with the Russian problem by saying it's something that all Americans should be concerned about. And if you understand Bob Mueller, if you sit across him every morning and perhaps every afternoon, as I have as his assistant director, and you learn that he speaks in measured but clear tones and style, you understand he's saying this is a huge problem and it's not being addressed, and every American needs to get on this and understand that this is still ongoing. That's how I read this, and his choice to start and end his statement with Russia reminds all of us that we're still not resolving this problem.
Glenn Kirshner, you also work for Bob Mueller. What you just saw and heard there from your former boss, is that what you were expecting?
Yeah, you know, that's the man Bob Mueller is. He's precise, he's factual, he's accurate. The man doesn't know the definition of hyperbole. And what he just told us, Craig, is that you have everything you need in this report to move forward and do the right thing, do justice, hold Russia accountable. I would add, hold the president accountable. And, you know, I think when he said, listen, I will not go beyond what's in my report if called before Congress. I think we all need to take that, Craig, as an affirmation that everything the American people and our elected politicians need to make their decisions and to move forward is right there in those 448 pages.
Matt Miller, 25 minutes ago, we were speculating about what Special Counsel Bob Mueller might say. Give me your top lines here. What are we missing?
You know, look, I think one of the things that surprised me a little bit is how much of this press conference was an implicit rebuke of Bill Barr. He did say, as already noted, that he's not saying the Attorney General is acting in good faith, but I think both on the Russian collusion side of the investigation and on the obstruction side, he said some things that directly contradicted what the Attorney General has said. On obstruction, which we've been talking somewhat about, you know, when Bill Barr held his press conference releasing the report, he was asked point blank, did the special counsel not make a determination on obstruction because he thought it ought to be left to Congress? And Barr said, you know, I hope that's not what he was doing. It's the job of prosecutors to make these determinations. And I thought Mueller made very clear in his statement that the Constitution leaves that question to Congress for a sitting president, and that because of that constitutional requirement and the Justice Department policy, it would have been unfair for him to make a determination and publicly accuse the president of a crime. I also thought on the Russian section,
Hey, Matt?
Yeah.
Let's just reflect on that with Craig, if I may. Sure. To be specific, because I think Matt makes a very nuanced point here.
Yeah, before you do that, though, I want to remind viewers and listeners precisely what it is Bob Mueller said about Bill Barr. Let's just take a listen to that.
We conducted an independent criminal investigation and reported the results to the Attorney General, as required by department regulations. The Attorney General then concluded that it was appropriate to provide our report to Congress and to the American people. At one point in time, I requested that certain portions of the report be released. The Attorney General preferred to make the entire report public all at once, and we appreciate that the Attorney General made the report largely public, and I certainly do not question the Attorney General's good faith in that decision.
And that's the phrase you want to...
Perfect, exactly. So as Craig drew our attention to the exact perfect point, and Matt, to be clear for viewers who are understanding what we just got moments ago for Bob Mueller, he says he doesn't question Attorney General Bill Barr's good faith in that decision. on that one issue of the report coming out. And to Barr's credit, much of the report was released. The redactions were considered by many the nonpartisan experts to be narrow, although Congress still wants to see all of it in its own way. And so, Matt, I think to build on that point before you move on to the other issues, what does it tell us that Mr. Mueller is basically being very publicly helpful to Barr on the disclosure part of this, on the transparency part, but not getting into some of the larger questions that you and others have pinpointed, which is that Mr. Barr's own statements not only mischaracterized the report, but Mr. Mueller's letter and the seeking of the disclosure was in part to try to clean up what looked like what many people called more like criminal defense work for the White House than Attorney General work.
Yeah, look, I doubt he would go that far. He certainly wouldn't use those words, but I think he is implicitly saying that the Attorney General mischaracterized my work. Look, he's saying that the Attorney General may have said it's the job of prosecutors to make these determinations, but I not only can't make this determination because of the Constitution and Department of Justice policy, but in this instance, it would be unfair of me to accuse the president of a crime. I also think on the Russia section, he said something very important. If you remember what the Attorney General has said over and over in his public statement, when he released this report and in subsequent interviews, it's that there was no collusion. He said this report, this investigation found that there was no collusion. He said at times that this report confirmed that it didn't happen. Well, Bob Mueller, when he talked in the opening of this press conference about what his investigation found about a broader conspiracy, what he said was, what we found is there is insufficient evidence to charge a conspiracy. That is very different than what the Attorney General came out and said, which is that no collusion didn't happen, and this investigation confirmed that it didn't happen.
Basically, they got away with it, is what he said.
Of course, former CIA Director John Brennan. Mr. Brennan, thanks so much for your time. I know that you were listening to the special
That's
counsel.
what insufficient evidence to charge means. Means they got away with it.
What did you take away from what he said, from what you heard?
Well, a couple of things. I think, as already been mentioned, this was Special Bob Mueller. Be precise and careful in his language, making a statement on his terms, and that's why I don't think he wants to be part of any type of political and partisan show on the Hill. And as has been mentioned, I think he would be willing to read his report, but go no further than that. Two, I think he made it quite clear that were it not for existing DOJ policy, as well as a constitutional process that holds a sitting president to account, that there is not a basis for him and his team to go forward with an indictment of a sitting president. But also he said very clearly that if he was able to exonerate a president of wrongdoing, he would have done that. So I do think he made it very explicit that there is an outstanding issue when it comes to wrongdoing on the part of Donald Trump on obstruction of justice, and that there are the options of dealing with it while Mr. Trump sits in office by the Congress, and after Mr. Trump leaves office, in terms of following through with some type of indictment so that charges can be looked at and Mr. Trump can defend himself as appropriate.
John Brennan with me now, MSNBC senior national security analyst, intelligence analyst. I think the direct quote you were alluding to there, Mr. Brennan, was, if we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
Yeah, I don't think he'd be any clearer than that. Again, that language is very, very carefully worded. That clearly shows that he could not, in all of his investigative work, demonstrate to his satisfaction, and I think to the public satisfaction, that Mr. Trump did not obstruct justice, but also making it very clear that, again, the parameters that he believed that he had to operate within existing DOJ policy, as well as the constitutional framework for holding the president accountable, did not allow him to move forward with that charge or indictment. And I think he sees that there is work yet to be done on obstruction of justice.
Or you were wanting to make a point about Congress and Democrats here.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at this in the broader context, because some people say, Craig, why, if there's substantial evidence against the sitting president, why doesn't he get charged? Is he not above the law. And there are good answers to this, which we've been exploring, and Mueller takes very seriously, which is the rules treat the president differently, precisely because he's the constitutional officer that takes care that the laws be faithfully executed. I think the larger political dynamic, we've been speaking about the law and the substance here in the half an hour since Bob Mueller came out and addressed the country and made this news. The political dynamics here, Craig, overlap with the legal dynamics because it is only Congress's job, not the prosecutor, not the press, not the voters. It is Congress's job to decide if and when high crimes were committed. And I think what Mueller did in his own careful way, he never insulted anybody today, obviously. He didn't criticize anyone. But if you read him carefully, as we've been doing, he's saying to Congress, and in the House, Democrats are in Congress, I can't do your job for you. I gave you evidence. I gave you a longer report than people ever usually get. Pat Fitzgerald investigated the White House. There wasn't a public report like this. And I think that is something that in the days ahead will be interesting to see. Did the country hear this? I don't know. I don't have that good hearing. But did the country hear this? And does the country then say, well, Congress, you said wait for Mueller. Mueller finished. Then you said, well, we need to hear from him publicly. And that took up some time. And Mueller came out publicly and said, I spoke. And Barr released it publicly, and I don't question his good faith in that decision. And it's up to the Congress, which we knew he put in this report as soon as we got it, to decide whether or not there were crimes in office. Because we've heard, in some ways, we've heard the Speaker try to avoid this day, kick the can down the road. We'll hear from Mueller later. It's not time yet. Mueller says the evidence is here, and Congress has decided. And then he says what Mr. Brennan just repeated, and what you pointed out in your reporting, Craig. Then he says, if we had confidence the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. Translation, Bob Mueller looked into this. Bob Mueller has a sterling reputation. Bob Mueller is saying publicly, we don't have confidence the president didn't commit crimes in office, and Congress is the place to adjudicate that, if at all. So this goes right back there for the House to decide or not to decide what to do about it.
Jeremy Bash, we are right now waiting for some sort of response from this White House. One would assume we would get something here very soon. We know that they were all huddled around their televisions at 11 o'clock Eastern, like all of us. Mr. Bash, is that how you heard it? This 448-page report, Bob Mueller saying it is essentially going to speak for itself and all but daring Congress to do something about what he reported.
Yeah, Craig, I was struck by a couple of things. Number one is Bob Mueller leaned really hard into the Office of Legal Counsel opinion that says that you cannot prosecute a sitting president even if you found that he engaged in criminal activity. That was kind of the centerpiece of his statement. It was, of course, present in his report, but the report was 448 pages. It was so long, it was so detailed that it was sort of, I think, hard to get the fundamental point. Number two, he clearly implied that Bill Barr mischaracterized his report, misled the American people and Congress when he rolled this out. This report came out on April 18th. I don't see really anything that Mueller said today that he couldn't have said 6 weeks ago. The reason he had to say it this way is, number one, is because the Attorney General has been misleading the public. Number two is because the President has been misleading the public. And because, number three, there's been a lot of confusion as to whether or not he was, in effect, teeing up the ultimate constitutional question, to Congress as to whether they could proceed with an investigation of the President's high crimes and misdemeanors. And I think the headline out of today's statement was that this was a green light for Congress to investigate and analyze and make decisions on the President's high crimes that could lead to a potential impeachment vote in the House of Representatives.
Mr. Brennan, let me come back to you for just a moment here before we go to Hans Nichols at the White House. Director, based on what we have seen and what we have heard from this Congress, is there any reason to believe that they are going to, in fact, act on Special Counsel Mueller's recommendations, or even that 9-minute statement we just got from him?
Well, I think Bob Mueller's public statement today is going to give momentum to those who want to move forward with impeachment hearings. I think there can be no doubt about Mr. Mueller's message that the obstruction of justice issue is not resolved and that there needs to be follow-up action on it. So I do think it's going to give some additional momentum to them. Whether or not they're going to decide to do it, as I pointed out, this is not just a legal issue, it's a political issue, and obviously there are political considerations. But I think the cry for impeachment is going to increase, and it's going to be interesting to see how the White House and Mr. Trump reacts to a very clear, and I believe very pointed statement by Bob Mueller.
Senior National Security and Intelligence Analyst and former CIA Director John Brennan on the phone with me there. Thank you, Director. Appreciate your time, sir. Let's go to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue now. Hans Nichols is standing by. And Hans, again, I go back to this quote. If we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. On its face, that would very much seem to undercut the assertion from this administration time and time again that there was no collusion. It sounds as if the special counsel's office is saying we don't have evidence.
And Craig, that's the challenge for the White House at this hour. The urgent challenge is how do they square what we just heard from Robert Mueller with what William Barr has been saying. Now, I was just trying to get something from press people upstairs. They don't seem to have decided if, when, or how they are going to respond to what Mueller just said, but you can appreciate their predicament. The challenge they have is not just the immediate reaction and who it comes from, but more importantly and longer term is how do they manage the president's response to what Mueller just said, because the president has vacillated. He's been all over the place. Sometimes he said Bob Mueller should testify. Other times he says it's ridiculous. Wait to see just how the president reacts. We do know from two administration officials that the White House didn't know the content of what Mueller was going to say, so they are being taken by this. They're bringing it all on board and trying to figure out just how they're going to respond on two fronts, both most immediately, but also how you manage the president's Twitter feed and when he interacts with reporters and many of the impromptu opportunities that he sometimes engages with us.
Hans, out of curiosity, where is the president right now?
Well, last I checked, he was not in the West Wing yet. The tip for always that is whether or not the president, the Marine Guard, is stationed out front of the West Wing. And so I didn't see a Marine Guard as of 20 minutes ago. Now, I haven't checked recently. Maybe he came in. In the past, the president likes to have what we call executive time upstairs in the residence, talking to sources, talking to friends, advisors, maybe perhaps watching a little cable television. Sometimes you get a sense of what the president is watching based on what he's tweeting. But as of this morning, as of post-Mueller, no tweets yet, but I haven't looked at my phone for 30 seconds, so I could be wrong on that.
Thank you so much, Hans. Again, let us know if and when we hear something official from the administration, sir. Joined now by Chuck Todd, NBC News political director, moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck, in the last few moments, speaking of Twitter, we did see this tweet from Congressman Justin Amash, of course. Congressman Amash, the only Republican so far who has called for impeachment. This is the tweet just a few moments ago. The ball is in our court, Congress. Chuck, what do we surmise that what we just heard from the special counsel is going to mean for more calls for impeachment?
Craig, I think that's the headline of this statement by Robert Mueller. The most important thing he clarified was what he meant in the introduction to page 2. And he basically, I said the most important sentence he said is we chose the words carefully. He chooses all of his words carefully. He was very careful what to emphasize and what he didn't. And I think he made it crystal clear. He believed this was not constitutionally a decision that could be made by anybody at the Justice Department, anybody that works for justice. And he believed he worked for justice. That's his way of saying, oh, by the way, hey, Bill Barr, this wasn't your call either. There is only one constitutional remedy for where this call is made, and it's Congress. So I think between that, Craig, and the fact that Justin Amash is making the clearest case for opening an impeachment inquiry right now, if you actually think about it, we know there's a group of House Democrats that believe there should be an impeachment inquiry, but who actually has laid out the reason to do it with more clarity than Justin Amash, both on social media and holding a town hall and putting his words out there. I think the political pressure now on the Democratic leadership in the House, I think Speaker Pelosi doesn't want to do impeachment. I think she's been hoping to run out the political calendar clock, if you will, get to the Labor Day and say, you know what, let's get through the presidential, don't distract from that. I think this 1-2 punch of Amash basically putting himself out there, making this a bipartisan call, and Mueller making it crystal clear what he believed was whose job this is. It's basically Congress. It's now up to you. It's your call.
Chuck, again, a reminder for our viewers and our listeners on Sirius Satellite Radio. This is what we heard from Bob Mueller a few moments ago as it pertains to the possibility that he might testify before Congress, either publicly or privately. Take a listen.
I would not provide information beyond that which is already public in any appearance before Congress. In addition, access to our underlying work product is being decided in a process that does not involve our office. So beyond what I have said here today and what is contained in our written work, I do not believe it is appropriate for me to speak further about the investigation or to comment on the actions of the Justice Department or Congress. And it's for that reason I will not be taking questions today as well.
Chuck, do you hear that? Is Bob Mueller basically telling the House and the Senate, read the report again? I'm not showing up to take your questions or be a part of your political theater?
No, I didn't. I took it as he doesn't want to,
okay.
But he did not say he wouldn't. He just essentially said, hey, if you do it, I'm going to bore you to death. I'm just going to read the report. I'm not going to tell you anything I didn't already put in the report. I think that was a way of tempering expectations, and I think it's also important, and I don't know if he wanted to lay this more out. I think Justice already knew this. The Judiciary Committee already knew this, but if they didn't, now they know it for sure. I think it is important that Mueller clarified he has no role in being able to even negotiate to provide certain parts of the underlying evidence to Congress, which means essentially that's a direct back and forth between the Judiciary Committee and the Department of Justice, i.e. Bill Barr. So, look, I didn't hear it as him saying, I'm not testifying. I heard him as saying, I don't want to testify. I don't think I'm going to provide you anything. If you think I'm going to provide you any more insight than I've already done, forget it. But I think there's going to be plenty in Congress who believe Bob Mueller should be the narrator of his work rather than just reading it. That there is a public, that it would play an important role in the public sphere if he essentially narrates his work. So, look, I suspect we're going to see Bob Mueller testify before Congress.
All right.
I suspect it'll be, perhaps the questioning is behind closed doors. It wouldn't surprise me if he could negotiate that. But he's going to be a private citizen. I don't know how much other than, how much he can negotiate in all this.
All right, stand by 1 second. We do have a tweet from the president. We also have our justice correspondent, Pete Williams, standing by as well. This is President Trump a few moments ago. Apparently he was, in fact, watching and listening. Quote, nothing changes from the Mueller report. There was insufficient evidence.
Get it all at All-Star. If you're in the market for an all-new Ford vehicle, look no further than All-Star Ford.
We're going to have to leave it there. Big thanks to you. Big thanks to all of my guests and panelists. Roughly an hour ago, Special Counsel Bob Mueller stepped to the microphone, spoke for roughly 9 minutes, announced that he was stepping away from the Special Counsel's office to return to private life. Did not take any questions, but left a lot of did not take any questions, but left a number of questions out there. Andrew Mitchell will try and answer some of them coming up. I'll see you tomorrow morning on Today.
And good day, I'm Andrea Mitchell in Washington, continuing our breaking news, our coverage here in Washington, where after more than 2 years, Robert Mueller just broke his silence, announcing his resignation as special counsel, saying he hopes and expects this will be his last spoken word on the subject, but not exonerating the president.
As set forth in the report after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime.
In that excerpt from the report, Mueller also saying for the first time that from the outset of the probe, under Justice Department rules, his office could not indict a sitting president, but indicating that now it is up to Congress.
The opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. And beyond department policy, we were guided by principles of fairness. It would be unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge. So that was Justice Department policy. Those were the principles under which we operated, and from them we concluded that we would not reach a determination one way or the other about whether the president committed a crime. That is the office's final position, and we will not comment on any other conclusions or hypotheticals about the president.
Mueller also made it clear he does not want to testify before Congress.
I hope and expect this to be the only time that I will speak to you in this matter. I am making that decision myself. No one has told me whether I can or should testify or speak further about this matter. There has been discussion about an appearance before Congress. Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report. It contains our findings and analysis and the reasons for the decisions we made. We chose those words carefully, and the work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony. I would not provide information beyond that which is already public in any appearance before Congress. I do not believe it is appropriate for me to speak further about the investigation or to comment on the actions of the Justice Department or Congress. And it's for that reason I will not be taking questions today as well.
And after that dramatic statement, Pete Williams, of course, was in the room. Let's get the very latest from our Justice correspondent, Pete Williams, NBC Justice and National Security correspondent, Julia Ainsley, outside the Justice Department as well. At the White House, we have Peter Alexander and NBC Intelligence and National Security correspondent, Ken Delanian, NBC Capitol Hill correspondent, Casey Hunt, MSNBC Justice and Security analyst, Matt Miller, and MSNBC National Security analyst, Jeremy Bash, former Chief of Staff at the CIA and the Pentagon. Pete, first to you. You've known Robert Mueller for a long time. You've covered him for a very long time. This was very dramatic. His statement to me appeared halting. You could understand the pressure he's under. Your first impressions, your headlines.
Well, I think you've hit the high points. Number one, he made it clear he doesn't want to testify before Congress. He said there's no point in it. He's not going to go beyond what's in his testimony. I hope this is my last statement about it, he said. So quite clear he's laying a marker down that it's his decision and his decision alone, that nobody's telling him what he can or cannot do, but he doesn't want to testify before Congress. The report speaks for itself. So this was an important inflection point in the career of this special counsel investigation. It's now completely over. The report largely ended it. He had some finishing up to do. Now he is no longer, or shortly will no longer be, the special counsel. He goes back to private life. The second point I thought was interesting today is, and you touched on it as well, it seems pretty clear now that in terms of the process, the special counsel's office made the decision from the outset that they could not charge the president with a crime, even if they found evidence of it. We had thought, reading the report, that maybe they assembled it all and said, okay, now let's see, can we charge him with the crime? Oops, I guess we can. That's not the way it worked. It's quite clear that they knew that going in. His summary of the report, though, doesn't go an inch beyond what the report says. It is a very accurate summary of what the report said. I did think it was interesting that given this report is 440 plus pages long, he did choose to pull out of it what is a very brief mention plus a footnote in section 2 of the report on obstruction when he said the opinion, meaning the Justice Department opinion, that they can't charge the president with a crime. The opinion says the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. And back to your original question, Andrea, yes, I remember when Bob Mueller first came onto the job in the literally the days before 9/11, following him through his remarkable 12-year
10-year career as director of the FBI and then in private life. He's 74 years old now, and I would say today he showed every evidence of being a 74-year-old man who's probably eager to return to private life.
Indeed, and also pulling out his emphasis on how Russia did have a widespread conspiracy, a Russian conspiracy, to attack our election, something that should be of concern, he said, to all Americans. So he is certainly signaling something that you've not heard.
At the beginning, and
yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, said that at the beginning, and then came back to the end, almost as if to say, in all the politics here, don't forget, somebody tried to interfere in our election, and that should be the big takeaway. And his office did distribute today the sort of in sort of its final report card, as though the report doesn't say it itself, the list of all the charges that they filed. And of course, key among those are the 2 charges against the Russians for the hacking and the social media interference in the election.
And that is what he read from when he began talking about that first indictment a year ago, June, I believe it was. Peter Alexander, the president tweeted, and now Sarah Sanders has issued a statement. The president, the tweet, just let's put it up there. Nothing changes from the Mueller report. There was insufficient evidence, and therefore in our country, a person is innocent. The case is closed. Thank you. And now Sarah Sanders' statement, and it seems to me she is certainly putting her own spin and cherry picking what has happened here today.
I think you're exactly right. First, it's clear the president was watching, not in the West Wing, but apparently in the residence, as Robert Mueller, for the first time in the course of this investigation, finally spoke out, putting out that tweet. But the president's tweet also ignores one of Robert Mueller's key takeaways, where he said, among other things, the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. So he wants to say the case is closed. Robert Mueller said, in fact, it wasn't up to me. The case really, in effect, isn't closed just yet. Congress will have the final say on that. And from Sarah Sanders just moments ago, we got the following statement. She just said, the special counsel has completed the investigation, closed his office, and has closed the case. Mr. Mueller explicitly said that he has nothing to add beyond the report and therefore does not plan to testify before Congress. Sanders adds the report was clear, there was no collusion, no conspiracy, and the Department of Justice confirmed there was no obstruction. Special counsel Mueller also stated that Attorney General Barr acted in good faith in his handling of the report. After 2 years, she concludes the special counsel is moving on with his life, and everyone else should do the same. Those are the words of the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders just moments ago. A couple of the things that sort of struck me as you consider the president's frequent attacks on Robert Mueller and his team over the course of this investigation. One, how many times did we hear the president call it a hoax or a witch hunt, where Robert Mueller himself said that the matters that they investigated were of, quote, paramount importance. That appeared to be a rebuttal to the attacks that came from the building behind me, and certainly from the president of the United States. And separately, beyond that, all those attacks at Robert Mueller and his team, Mueller himself said that those individuals, in advance of his resignation from the Office of Special Counsel from the Department of Justice, he said that they were of the, quote, highest integrity. Really, the only words we have heard from Robert Mueller combating the attacks that came his way for the president over the course of this time. But of course, Andrea, the biggest takeaway here was, for all the efforts this White House has made, the president through the megaphone of Twitter, through his aides, through public events, through placards that he had in front of him, where he said no obstruction and no collusion. We didn't hear either of those words from Robert Mueller today. Certainly didn't hear total exoneration. In fact, Robert Mueller said the opposite of what the president said, which is that there's still potentially more to be done. It just isn't going to be done by the Office of the Special Counsel.
Peter, all of those points so interesting. Joining us now by phone is former Acting Solicitor General of the United States, Neil Katyal, who helped write the original legislation that enabled this report, or enabled this investigation. Neil, your takeaway from Robert Mueller's conclusion today?
I think 2 things. Number one, it was classic Mueller, just by the book, exactly sticking to what the report said. But number 2, what he chose to pull out of the report and emphasize the idea that if he could clear the president, he would, that the Office of the Special Counsel has folks of the highest integrity and the like, and that he couldn't charge the president under DOJ guidelines. All of that taken together together is a very, very damning portrait of the president. And what this really is all about is one thing, the next step. And what Mueller is saying between the lines is that next step is the Congress of the United States, which is charged by, under the Constitution, with the duty of impeachment. And I don't think there's any other way to read what was said today than that.
Thank you so much, Neil Katyal. Casey Hunt, pick it up from there. You cover Congress. This is clearly going to increase the pressure on Congress, the pressure that Nancy Pelosi has been trying to hold back from members of her caucus to do something, especially now that it might seem unfair and burdensome, really, to bring Robert Mueller in after he has said that he does not want to testify and would only stick to the report. This would seem to lead to them rethinking impeachment.
Andrea, I think that you are certainly already seeing that pressure build. There is this big question as to whether, in the wake of this, the House Judiciary Committee would subpoena Robert Mueller. Mueller obviously was trying to make clear that he doesn't have anything to add, and really the only way in which this would add to our sort of national discourse about this is, frankly, with the dramatic spectacle of having him appear in public. But I do think that the broader point about pressure for impeachment has already sharply escalated just in the hour or so since Robert Mueller concluded his remarks. And there was a piece of the Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler's statement that really stood out to me. He said, given that Special Counsel Mueller was unable to pursue criminal charges against the president, it falls to Congress to respond to the crimes, lies, and other wrongdoing of President Trump, and we will do so. Now, Jerry Nadler has been very careful to adhere closely to what Nancy Pelosi has laid out on impeachment, which is essentially the idea that the president is goading them into this. He thinks it would be a political win for them. They would be handing the president re-election. They would be dividing the country unnecessarily. But this, to me, really feels like a significant step in the direction of impeachment. Cory Booker, who obviously is on the Senate side, is out calling it a moral imperative now. I think that idea is likely to snowball in the wake of what Robert Mueller said. I mean, he did not specifically say, hey, Congress, you make this decision, but it was written all over the remarks that he made today. And he was clear, finally, about what, his intentions were in laying out and not being able to charge the president, and essentially saying this is out of our hands at the Department of Justice. This is up to you, the United States Congress. So, I think Congress is away this week for the Memorial Day recess. So we're sort of hearing from members one by one in a piecemeal way. But I think over the next couple of weeks, you're really potentially going to see the pressure build, and we're going to get a sense of whether or not these impeachment proceedings are ultimately inevitable. Andrea?
Well, I wanted to come here to Jeremy Bash first, because you were general counsel at House Intelligence, and it struck a lot of people in the last few weeks that you've got so many different committees. You've got financial services and oversight and judiciary and intelligence, and maybe it would have been a lot cleaner and easier for Nancy Pelosi if she had earlier acceded to a select committee, and that would have perhaps called the flurry of subpoenas and perhaps brought the non-Kentucky Fried Chicken eating members in on that committee and elevated the level of this inquiry so that perhaps they could proceed now in a more organized fashion.
I think she has a lot of confidence in the Judiciary Chairman, Jerry Nadler, Andrea. But I think let's translate what Bob Mueller said, because if you know Bob Mueller the way Matt Miller, the way you know him, he was foot-stomping the podium pretty hard today. He took out the report and he highlighted the sentences that said, the president did obstruct justice. I cannot charge him because the Office of Legal Counsel Policy says I cannot. There is only one way under our Constitution for the president to be held accountable for wrongdoing, and that is under Article 1 that says the sole power of impeachment rests with the House of Representatives. He was making the constitutional plea to the nation and to the Congress to read the report, focus on its findings, and do its job. And I agree with the sentiment that this is going to build pressure in the House and in the Congress more generally for impeachment.
And if I could add just one other element, he really emphasized that Russia attacked us because of all this talk. You have the President of the United States standing next to Vladimir Putin, and taking Putin's point of view rather than our intelligence agencies. And also, of course, now we have the Attorney General going into re-litigation through a very serious investigation, grabbing declassification abilities from the intelligence, from the DNI and from the CIA, and into the origins of the Russia probe. And this brings it right, Matt Miller, to the fore, that Russia attacked us. This is serious, that all Americans should be concerned about it.
Yeah, it does. I agree completely with Jeremy's analysis. I think one way to look at what Bob Mueller did today was really devastate the account that Bill Barr has given to the American public about what his investigation found.
Without saying so.
And contradict what the White House press secretary said in the statement that you just read a little while ago. That statement had two parts. The first part was to say that this is what the report found, that there was no collusion. That is a lie. The report did not find that there was no collusion, despite the Attorney General saying that publicly. And Bob Mueller made very clear today, in quoting from the report and using the same language, that when we investigated the Russian conspiracy, what we found was that there was insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy. That's very different than saying there was no collusion. If you read the report, there's evidence of collusion all over the place. And with respect to the obstruction piece, her statement that the Department of Justice confirmed that there was no obstruction, well, that's because we have two Department of Justices right now. We have the Department of Justice led by Bill Barr, who made his own determination of obstruction of justice, and then we have what Bob Mueller found. And he made very clear today that he was not finding, and he was not saying that the president did not obstruct justice. In fact, he said explicitly, as he did in the report, if I could tell you the president didn't commit a crime, I would say so. The fact that I haven't is only because of this constitutional restriction that the Department of Justice has imposed on me through this Office of Legal Counsel memo.
And the very fact that they did not have testimony from the president, aside from the written answers, they didn't push that. But Ken Delanian picked this up here. There's a lot that they could not get to, both because of the refusal of the president to testify, other witnesses not being available, people changing their story, Manafort and the problems that they had with him as a witness. So there are a lot of reasons why they could not reach conclusions about what did or did not happen.
That's correct, Andrea, including also the destruction of emails and other evidence that I cited in the report. But it's also the case, Andrea, that because of the regulations under which Robert Mueller was operating, the special counsel rules, very different from the independent counsel rules that govern Ken Starr and Lawrence Walsh, Moran Concha fame, this whole thing transpired.
Thank you. Really click the like button number 4 times.
I've seen some criticism of Robert Mueller on my Twitter feed, more than I have before after this statement, because this is in a way very frustrating to the resistance and to some Democrats who had hoped that Robert Mueller was going to get in there and get the truth about what happened with Donald Trump and his campaign in Russia. Not just the narrow question of whether crimes were committed, but what were the moral and ethical obligations that the Trump team had when they were approached by those Russian operatives? Did they call the FBI? Was national security harmed? And the fact that Mueller is not able to speak to that, nor is he able to say clearly whether he believes Donald Trump obstructed justice, is really frustrating to a lot of people. And yes, people can say, well, it's over to you, Congress. But, your point about a select committee is a very interesting one. We don't have a select committee right now. What we have are disparate congressional investigations, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, and the Democrats have been unable to put a narrative in front of the American public. They're being blocked. One of the key witnesses on obstruction is former White House counsel Don McGahn. He is going to fight tooth and nail testifying. So it's unclear whether they can get a narrative that drives to impeachment in front of the American public. And as we all know right now, there just aren't the votes in the Senate to convict the president, Andrea.
And Julia Ainsley at the Justice Department, Bill Barr probably has to feel relieved that at least the words that were spoken about him were that the Attorney General has been fair about the way he's turned over the redacted report. But that said, the underlying message here, as Matt and Jeremy and others have been pointing out, is that the Justice Department is not being straightforward.
Well, that's true, right? He said that William Barr acted in good faith when he decided to put forward what he said is largely the report. He made it seem like the redactions were not significant, but I couldn't help but see this presser through William Barr's eyes today to see what he might have taken away. And one of those things would be the idea that since this report has come out, the Attorney General has appointed someone to look into the origins of this investigation and whether or not there was unauthorized surveillance of members of the Trump campaign. I think subtly today, and subtle is about as what we get in usual terms from Robert Mueller, is that he did say that this had a very important mission, that they were not, and this is not a biased investigation, they went out there to find something that was critical to our democracy, and they found something, which was systematic interference from a foreign government and from private internet people who were coming in to influence our election and our opinions via social media. We saw that in the indictment, so he wanted to emphasize that. Other things that have happened since his report that I thought were interesting that he emphasized was this idea that there is another process in order to find the president wrongdoing, that he, in order to investigate criminal wrongdoing by the president, it should be through the criminal justice system. That also seems like something that is going directly against what William Barr said when this Justice Department countless times has said that it is not the OLC opinion that caused the special counsel's office not to have an opinion and not to make a decision when it came to obstruction of justice. So seeing this through William Barr's eyes, you can take away some good things. He also said that there was nobody keeping him from testifying, so that relieves that burden from William Barr's shoulders. But other than that, it does seem like there are some takeaways where Robert Mueller was pushing back slightly on what we've heard from the Justice Department.
And Julia, joining us now, Frank Figliuzzi, former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence and MSNBC National Security Analyst, Maya Wiley, Senior Vice President for Social Justice at the New School and an MSNBC legal analyst, and Joyce Vance, former U.S. Attorney and MSNBC contributor. Joyce, let me ask you first whether you agree with giving William Barr a pass, as Mueller, at least on the face of it, did, but not, of course, the underlying thrust of his comments today.
Mueller did say very clearly that he did not doubt the Attorney General's good faith as he had rolled out the Mueller report to the public. I have difficulty accepting that conclusion. I don't doubt Bob Mueller. He may have had a variety of reasons for making that comment, but it was very clear today that Barr did not engage in good faith conversations when he discussed his, quote, principal conclusions about the report the weekend it was released.
And Frank Figliuzzi, let's talk about what he emphasized from that original indictment against the Russians.
Right. He opened his statement, Andrea, and he closed his statement with the Russian problem. And he reminded all Americans that we should all be concerned about this. And so we have to ask ourselves, just as we're asking the question, what next with regard to obstruction? What next with regard to Congress and potential impeachment? We should also be asking ourselves, what next with regard to protecting the 2020 election from any foreign power that wants to interfere with it? And are we doing enough? And, you know, it's a choice that has to be made here. The White House, the Department of Justice, they've got to decide, are we going to go ahead and make significant initiatives against foreign power interference with elections, or are we going to fall into a trap where if we concede that a foreign power meddled with us, somehow the president's election was illegitimate? Mueller said today, look, let's put all the politics aside. Every American needs to be worried about what a foreign adversary has done to our election process.
And I just want to recap also exactly what Mueller said about William Barr and the release of the report.
At one point in time, I requested that certain portions of the report be released. The Attorney General preferred to make the entire report public all at once. And we appreciate that the Attorney General made the report largely public, and I certainly do not question the Attorney General's good faith in that decision.
Maya Wiley, your take on that part of what he said as well?
Yeah, I think very clearly what he said is, I don't question the good faith of William Barr's releasing the full report. The letter that Bob Mueller sent to William Barr after William Barr released the summary statement that had us all scratching our heads a bit when we saw some of the ways that Barr articulated the findings, particularly when he was not quoting fully from Bob Mueller's report, remember, suggesting that there was no collusion, even though there was the statement in his own summary said that Bob Mueller did not have evidence to establish, which is very different legally, to establish conspiracy. So I kind of read Bob Mueller as being very careful about what parts of William Barr's actions he was ascribing good faith to. But I think that it also goes to the fact that Bob Mueller doesn't really have a very strong argument for not testifying to Congress for this very reason. I mean, essentially, he himself, in his own report, lays out
Anybody still here?
questions that he himself, at footnote number
Says 0 people watching.
1091, says Congress should interrogate.
You know how much you can negotiate and all that.
All right, stand by 1 second. Is innocent. The case is closed. Thank you. Our chief legal correspondent standing by. Is that how it works?
Well, good news. I mean, it's a serious day, but the tweet is laughable. The defendant says the case is closed. If only. Look, as we've reported in the past, there was good news in the Mueller report for Donald Trump, chiefly in the lack of a chargeable election conspiracy. I've said that before, and I'll say it again in fairness to him. But no, the case is not closed. As Chuck Todd was just saying, as John Brennan was saying, as other people have said who I don't think bring necessarily any assumption about the outcome, the Mueller report stated Congress deals with high crimes by the president. And the only reason that there wasn't, from the beginning, a treatment of whether or not Donald Trump committed a crime was because of the rules of the Justice Department. I.e., the tweet you just read, which we report, of course, what the president says, is false. It is, in its substance and essence, false. Now, the other point I wanted to raise, building on what Chuck Todd was telling us, is the Democrats were just told by Bob Mueller that he doesn't have reason at this stage to go and say a lot more in public because the report presents the most careful and clear presentation of his findings. The other way that the country could hear from Bob Mueller, what Chairman Nadler just alluded to, what Justice Amash is talking about, is if there was an actual impeachment probe, not a summary of the report, but an impeachment probe set of hearings, or a process to impeach, or a collection of evidence, or a House vote, or a Senate trial. I'm not prejudging whether or not any of those things would happen, but if they did, yes, you could call in the prosecutor and members of his team to present the evidence, because there would be constitutionally warranted process whereby prosecutors would present evidence. What Mueller is saying it's not he'll never talk. I don't think. What he's saying, and I think Chuck Todd nailed it, is if asked to talk about the report, he's going to say,
read the report.
Did you read it?
No.
Do you want me to read parts of it? Is this Reading Rainbow? Remember, a great show, but Bob Mueller is more serious than that, and so I say that deliberately. He's saying this is not Reading Rainbow.
Yeah.
Read the report, decide what to do about it. If Congress wants to hold an impeachment probe or present evidence, he'll get involved. And I think that is a very key thing today, Craig, because the last thing I'll say, I know you have a lot of guests to get to. We have every indication that Bob Mueller wasn't trying to give a televised press conference, wasn't rushing out to speak about this, was hoping the process would work and that Congress would come to a judgment, yes or no. And instead, Congress has done a lot of, well, we might need more from Mueller and it might take more time. And he's put an end to that. The ball is in Congress's court 100% today.
Justice Correspondent Pete Williams standing by. Pete, within the last few moments, we have heard from Jerry Nadler, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. I will not read his entire statement, but he did say in the last paragraph, although the Department of Justice prevented the special counsel from bringing criminal charges against the president, the special counsel has clearly demonstrated that President Trump is lying about the special counsel's findings, lying about the testimony of key witnesses in the special counsel's report, and is lying in saying that the special counsel found no obstruction and no collusion. Given that special counsel Mueller was unable to pursue criminal charges against the president, it falls to Congress to respond to the crimes, lies, and other wrongdoing of President Trump, and we will do so. Not even the President of the United States is above the law. Pete, have we heard anything from the Justice Department in response to what we just heard from its special counsel, Robert Mueller?
No, didn't expect to. There's nothing to respond to from the Justice Department's perspective. He's basically saying, I'm done. I have nothing more to say. A couple of points I think need emphasizing based on what I've been hearing in the past half hour or so. Number one, it's quite clear Mueller does not want to testify before Congress. He made that quite clear. The report is my testimony, he said. You played a short excerpt, but let me back up just a little bit from that. What he said is, I hope and expect that this will be the only time I will speak about this matter. Now, when he first said that, I thought to myself, he means in a forum like this. Not necessarily in Congress, but after consulting with some of his folks, he meant that to include his testimony as well. And he said, this is my decision. I made this decision myself. Nobody told me whether I can or should testify or speak further about the matter. So, from his own lips, Bob Mueller does not want to testify before Congress. Will he ultimately agree to do so in a closed session? Perhaps so, with the transcript to be released later. But what he said is, don't get your hopes up. I'm not going to go beyond what's in the report. And as for access to my materials that my staff gathered, that's not my call. That's going to be up to the Justice Department. In essence, he no longer works for the government as of today. That's point one. Point two is nothing about how he summarized his report is new. So what the president said today, what Jerry Nadler said, all these other people, they could have said the same thing, and in fact largely did after the report itself came out, because he added nothing to it, nor did he intend to. I thought what I learned from this is...
Welcome viewers, say hello in the chat.
It did seem to me that he was saying that they made the decision going in that they couldn't charge the president with the crime because it would be unconstitutional. It does seem, when you read the report, and, you know, this has sort of mystified a lot of people, that it does seem like they made the decision at the end, that they gathered all the evidence and they said, okay, now, can we say whether or not any of this evidence constitutes obstruction of justice on the part of the president? I guess we can't, so therefore we can't even decide whether it did. It seems to me that that process is not the way it actually worked, based on what he said today, but that was their going-in proposition, that they all were well aware of that. And in fact, one of the people that came to work early on Mueller's staff in the special counsel's office was Michael Dreeben here from the Solicitor General's office, who's one of the government's leading experts, if not the leading expert on the Constitution. So they clearly were thinking about this question from the very beginning. One other note I would just say, it's a footnote, one line and a footnote in the report about this business of whether Congress, this impeachment, it didn't use the word, he didn't use the word today, but it did seem interesting to me that in this relatively short summary of a 440-plus page report, he did choose to say this. The opinion, meaning the report says the Constitution requires, and this means the Justice Department's opinion on whether you can charge a president, requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a president of wrongdoing. I did think it was interesting that he chose to put that in there, Craig.
Our Justice Correspondent, Pete Williams, outside the Department of Justice. Pete, thanks as always. Sir, let me bring in Congressman Eric Swalwell now, Democrat from California, a member of the aforementioned House Judiciary Committee. He is also a candidate for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination. Congressman, thanks for your time. We'll start with what Pete just mentioned there, this idea that Bob Mueller does not want to testify. Do you plan on compelling the special counsel to come before the House Judiciary Committee in a public setting?
Good morning, Craig. We're going to hear from Bob Mueller. America needs to hear from Bob Mueller. We paid for this years-long investigation. I believe that he ultimately will. I believe he's a patriot. He may be reluctant about it, but seeing is believing. And Mr. Mueller raising his right hand and laying out for the American people what the Russians did to our democracy and what the president and his team did to obstruct an investigation into that attack is critically important. I have full confidence that we will hear from him.
But Congressman, we just heard from him, and essentially what Bob Mueller seems to be saying is that if you call me, I am going to refer you back to my 448-page report. What more do you hope to hear from Bob Mueller?
Again, it's the difference between, seeing the movie and reading the book. And, people are busy. They're taking their kids to school. They're working hard at their jobs. But the special counsel, a very articulate, experienced prosecutor, can lay out for the American people in his words what the Russians did and what the president did to obstruct. But we also want to get the full report. And if this president is so innocent, so cleared, so exonerated, he needs to let us have 100% of the report, because an eighth of it right now is buried beneath the earth. He needs to unearth it and allow Bob Mueller to also speak to that evidence.
What did that roughly 9-minute statement from Bob Mueller, what did it do for calls from folks in your party, those calls for impeachment?
It certainly, I think, will amplify those calls. It's a road that I've always said that we're going to be on and end up at anyway. But taking a step back, Craig, the call that I also heard from Mr. Mueller, was for every American to care about what the Russians did. That includes you, Mr. President, because he is the only leader in our country who has not acknowledged what the Russians did to our democracy. I also believe there's a call for future presidents to get rid of the DOJ rule that says the president cannot be indicted. I have said that if I win, day one, I will tell the DOJ to lift that policy. I hope every Democratic nominee makes that pledge. No president should be immunized in the way that this president has been immunized, because he would be indicted right now, is what special counsel told us.
All right, our moderator of Meet the Press, NBC News political director Chuck Todd has been standing by. He has been listening to all of this. Chuck, your reaction to the reaction?
Well, look, I'm not surprised. I think, again, I think it's a, you know, I look at this and I think the Democrats do have a dilemma, and I think I think this isn't as easy to be able to sit here and say, oh, geez, if you choose to be in favor of impeachment, you're making a political decision, or if you choose not to be in favor, you're making a political decision. I think these are tough choices. I think this is it's an unusual proceeding you've got to do. You've got to weigh a lot of things. I think you've got to weigh the focus of the country. So I don't think this is, even though it's clear to me Mueller basically said, look, Congress, you know, whether you like it or not, this is in your court. It isn't a no-brainer that they should do this. I do think, though, that every Democrat has to think about a short-term and long-term. As they think about the short-term decision about this, and what feels politically correct in the moment, I would just remind them of how a bunch of Democrats debated the Iraq War resolution back in 2002. The politics of the Iraq War resolution was one thing in that period of time, with an election coming up and patriotic fervor running rampant in a post-9/11 world. And then 5 years later, that vote is one of the bigger stains you can have as an American politician in the Democratic Party these days. That is what I think all of these politicians have to weigh. Maybe what the founders would have thought, maybe what the public expects, but also, what's this going to look like in 5 years?
Chuck, thank you, sir. Barbara McQueen is also with me, former U.S. Attorney, MSNBC legal analyst. And Barbara, we are unsurprisingly starting to get a reaction from Democratic presidential candidates, in addition to Congressman Swalwell, we just heard from there. Cory Booker tweeting, Bob Mueller's statement makes it clear Congress has a legal and moral obligation to begin impeachment proceedings immediately. We're also getting a statement from Jay Sekulow. Jay Sekulow, of course, counsel to the president's attorney there. The announcement by Special Counsel Mueller that the office is closing and that he is resigning to return to private life puts a period on a 2-year investigation that produced no findings of collusion or obstruction against the president. The Attorney General conclusively determined that there was no obstruction by the president. In the words of Attorney General Barr, the report identifies no actions that, in our judgment, constitute obstructive conduct. Again, that coming from Jay Sekulow, counsel to President Trump.
That's not what he said.
No, I don't see a period. I see a dash. I'm done with my work, and now Congress, it's your turn. You know, I know we all compliment Robert Mueller on his eloquence, but I wish he were a little less nuanced. You know, Key and Peele used to have this comedy bit where they did the Obama anger translator, and so I'll be Robert Mueller's translator. Here's what I heard him say. There was no hoax. Russia interfered with our election. There's no coup. These people acted with integrity in their investigation. I can't find obstruction of justice because the law says I can't charge a sitting president. But you know who can? Congress can. It's your turn. Read my damn report. It's all there.
And Barbara McQueen, we should also point out that we're giving you 10 additional points for the Key and Peele reference on this Wednesday morning. Thank you. Bret Stephens has also joined me. Bret, of course, New York Times columnist, also an MSNBC contributor. And Bret, the quote that continues to stand out to me from what we heard from Bob Mueller there, if we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. Do we think that what we just heard from Bob Mueller there at the top of the hour, that 9-minute statement, no questions, do we think that is in any way, shape, or form going to help us move forward, or is this going to create even more questions now?
I think it creates a great many questions, and I think Mueller has a responsibility, if he's subpoenaed by Congress, to testify in any setting that Congress demands. That now that especially now that he's a private citizen and not working for the Justice Department, that seems to me all the more the case. The argument that he can't say anything beyond the 448 pages of the report just strikes me as untrue. There are major questions that have to be answered, not least with his differences with the Attorney General Bob Barr that came out and surfaced with that letter he wrote to the Attorney General. What I did hear Mueller saying pretty clearly is, I'm not going to be your messiah. I'm not going to be the guy who stands on high to deliver a verdict. Ultimately, this is like all impeachment cases, this is a confluence of legal issues and political and ethical judgments that only Congress itself can resolve. People keep looking to Bob Mueller to sort of give us the answer, and he demurred. That being said, I still think he has an obligation to testify.
Adding to our list of Democratic presidential contenders who are responding now, California Democrat Kamala Harris, who spoke to Ellen Hilliard just a few moments ago. Take a listen.
Prosecution of a sitting president would unconstitutionally undermine the capacity of the executive branch to perform its constitutionally assigned functions. Should that be DOJ policy? And should the special counsel have sought to charge President Trump with obstruction of justice?
All right, so look, I think what we are clear about is that we learned a few things today. And most importantly, what we learned is that the special counsel did not return an indictment because of that memo. In other words, but for that memo, I believe a fair inference from what we heard from Bob Mueller is that there would have been indictments returned against this president. And the other thing we learned today is that the current Attorney General of the United States misled the American people when he spoke about his conversation with Bob Mueller and suggested that Bob Mueller said no. It had nothing to do with but for that memo. There wasn't enough there. So these are the issues that are now, I think, very clear. And the bottom line is, one, we have got to now let the process, start its course around Congress acting on what we know is essentially indictable evidence and information.
Should it be policy, DOJ policy, the inability to indict the sitting president?
I think that if I were president, I would ask and hope that the Attorney General and an Attorney General who actually had justice in mind instead of covering up for the president, I would hope and ask that she would put in place a procedure of questioning whether that memo is actually necessary and applicable when we have situations such as this. Because after all, remember, it's an advisory memo, it's not the law.
Senator, what was the message that Mr. Mueller was sending to you, a sitting member of Congress? And do you have a reaction to the president's tweet saying that this case is closed and nothing has changed?
Well, I try not to respond to those tweets, but I will say that I think what is clear is that I think it's a fair inference from what we heard in that press conference that Bob Mueller was essentially referring impeachment to the United States Congress.
Thanks, guys.
Kamala Harris, upstate South Carolina, on the heels of that town hall last night here on MSNBC. Just a few minutes here left, and we'll come back out to you here, Brett, for a moment. Is that what you heard from Bob Mueller? Was he calling on Congress to essentially do something?
Well, he was saying that this is not in my hands, it's in Congress's hands. I don't know, I mean, the statement was somewhat, I guess, oracular is the word. Do something can also mean doing nothing, laying it to rest. I mean, he made it clear that he was not exonerated, that the report did not.
Welcome, viewer. Feel free to say hello in the chat.
There's a great question as to then what that do something ought to be, and there are a range of options before the Congress, by the way, which are not simply impeachment or doing nothing. There's also such a thing as censure, which is one of the things that Democrats were recommending against President Clinton 21 years ago during the saga of his own impeachment. So this is a judgment that's both legal as well as political that only the Congress itself can determine. I mean, if I were offering Democrats in Congress advice, to the extent that they take it, I'd say censure's a good bet because
in Washington, continuing our breaking news, our coverage here in Washington, where after more than 2 years, Robert Mueller just broke his silence, announcing his resignation as special counsel, saying he hopes and expects this will be his last spoken word on the subject, but not exonerating the president.
As set forth in the report after that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime.
In that excerpt from the report, Mueller also saying for the first time that from the outset of the probe, under Justice Department rules, his office could not indict a sitting president, but indicating that now it is up to Congress.
The opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a
Welcome to viewer number 2. Feel free to say hello in the chats.
And beyond department policy, we were guided by principles of fairness. It would be unfair to potentially accuse somebody of a crime when there can be no court resolution of the actual charge. So that was Justice Department policy. Those were the principles under which we operated, and from them we concluded that we would not reach a determination one way or the other about
And
whether
click the like button if you haven't already.
that is the office's final position, and we will not comment on any other conclusions or hypotheticals about the president.
Mueller also made it clear he does not want to testify before Congress.
I hope and expect this to be the only time that I will speak to you in this matter. I am making that decision myself. No one has told me whether I can or should testify or speak further about this matter. There has been discussion about an appearance before Congress. Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report. It contains our findings and analysis and the reasons for the decisions we made. We chose those words carefully, and the work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony. I would not provide information beyond that which is already public in any appearance before Congress. I do not believe it is appropriate for me to speak further about the investigation or to comment on the actions of the Justice Department or Congress. It is for that reason I will not be taking questions today as well.
And after that dramatic statement, Pete Williams, of course, was in the room. Let's get the very latest from our Justice correspondent, Pete Williams, NBC Justice and National Security correspondent, Julia Ainsley, outside the Justice Department as well. At the White House, we have Peter Alexander and NBC Intelligence and National Security correspondent, Ken Delanian, NBC Capitol Hill correspondent, Casey Hunt, MSNBC Justice and Security analyst, Matt Miller, and MSNBC National Security analyst, Jeremy Bash, former Chief of Staff at the CIA and the Pentagon. Pete, first to you. We've known Robert Mueller for a long time. We've covered him for a very long time. This was very dramatic. His statement to me appeared haunting. You can understand the pressure he's under. Your first impressions, your headlines.
Well, I think you've hit the high points. Number one, he made it clear he doesn't want to testify before Congress. He said there's no point in it. He's not going to go beyond what's in his testimony. I hope this is my last statement about it, he said. So quite clear he's laying a marker down that it's his decision and his decision alone. And nobody's telling him what he can or cannot do. But he doesn't want to testify before Congress. The report speaks for itself. So this was an important inflection point in the career of this special counsel investigation. It's now completely over. The report largely ended it. He had some finishing up to do. Now he is no longer, or shortly will no longer be, the special counsel. He goes back to private life. The second point I thought was interesting today is, and you touched on it as well, it seems pretty clear now that in terms of the process, the special counsel's office made the decision from the outset that they could not charge the president with a crime, even if they found evidence of it. We had thought, reading the report, that maybe they assembled it all and said, okay, now, let's see, can we charge him with the crime? Oops, I guess we can. That's not the way it worked. It's quite clear that they knew that going in. His summary of the report, though, doesn't go an inch beyond what the report says. It is a very accurate summary of what the report said. I did think it was interesting that given this report is 440 plus pages long, he did choose to pull out of it what is a very brief mention plus a footnote in section 2 of the report on obstruction when he said the opinion, meaning the Justice Department opinion, that they can't charge the president with a crime. The opinion says the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing. And back to your original question, Andrea, yes, I remember when Bob Mueller first came onto the job in the literally the days before 9/11, following him through his remarkable 12-year career.
Well, thank you for clicking the like button.
And then in private life. He's 74 years old now, and I would say today he showed every evidence of being a 74-year-old man who's probably eager to return to private life.
Indeed, and also pulling out his emphasis on how Russia did have a widespread conspiracy, a Russian conspiracy to attack our election, something that should be of concern, he said, to all Americans. So he is certainly signaling something that you've not heard from the beginning. Yeah, you go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, said that at the beginning and then came back to the end, almost as if to say, in all the politics here, don't forget, somebody tried to interfere in our election, and that should be the big takeaway. And his office did distribute today the sort of in sort of its final report card, as though the report doesn't say it itself, the list of all the charges that they filed. And of course, key among those are the 2 charges against the Russians for the hacking and the social media interference in the election.
And that is what he read from when he began talking about
buffering, and we're back.
Congress will have the final say on that. And from Sarah Sanders just moments ago, we got the following statement. She just said, the special counsel has completed the investigation, closed his office, and has closed the case. Mr. Mueller explicitly said that he has nothing to add beyond the report and therefore does not plan to testify before Congress. Sanders adds, the report was clear there was no collusion, no conspiracy, and the Department of Justice confirmed there was no obstruction. Special counsel Mueller also stated that Attorney General Barr acted in good faith in his handling of the report. After 2 years, she concludes the special counsel is moving on with his life, and everyone else should do the same. Those are the words of the White House press secretary Sarah Sanders just moments ago. A couple of the things that sort of struck me as you consider the president's frequent attacks on Robert Mueller and his team over the course of this investigation. One, how many times did we hear the president call it a hoax or a witch hunt, where Robert Mueller himself said that the matters that they investigated were of, quote, paramount importance, that appeared to be a rebuttal to the attacks that came from the building behind me and certainly from the President of the United States. And separately, beyond that, all those attacks at Robert Mueller and his team, Mueller himself said that those individuals, in advance of his resignation from the Office of Special Counsel from the Department of Justice, he said that they were of the, quote, highest integrity. Really, the only words we have heard from Robert Mueller combating the attacks that came his way from the president over the course of this time. And of course, Andrea, the biggest takeaway here was, for all the efforts this White House has made, the president through the megaphone of Twitter, through his aides, through public events, through placards that he had in front of him, where he said no obstruction and no collusion. We didn't hear either of those words from Robert Mueller today. Certainly didn't hear total exoneration. In fact, Robert Mueller said the opposite of what the president said, which is that there's still potentially more to be done. It just isn't going to be done by the Office of the Special Counsel.
Peter,
Yeah, too bad you morons didn't investigate whether Trump was behind 9/11.
is former acting Solicitor General of the United States, Neil Katyal, who
It's fucking obvious that he was.
legislation that enabled this report or enabled this investigation. Neil, your takeaway from Robert Mueller's conclusion today?
I think 2 things. Number one, it was classic Mueller, just by the book, exactly sticking to what the report said. But number 2, what he chose to pull out of the report and emphasize the idea that if he could clear the president, he would. That the Office of the Special Counsel has folks of the highest integrity and the like, and that he couldn't charge the president under DOJ guidelines. All of that taken together is a very, very damning portrait of the president. And what this really is all about is one thing. The And what Mueller is saying between the lines is that next step is the Congress of the United States, which is charged by, under the Constitution, with the duty of impeachment. And I don't think there's any other way to read what was said today than that.
Thank you so much, Neil Katyal. Casey Hunt, pick it up from there. You cover Congress. This is clearly going to increase the pressure on Congress, the pressure that Nancy Pelosi has been trying to hold back from members of her caucus to do something, especially now that it might seem unfair and burdensome, really, to bring Robert Mueller in after he has said that he does not want to testify and would only stick to the report. This would seem to lead to them rethinking impeachment.
Andrea, I think that you are certainly already seeing that pressure build. There is this big question as to whether, in the wake of this, the House Judiciary Committee would subpoena Robert Mueller. Mueller obviously was trying to make clear that he doesn't have anything to add. I mean, really, the only way in which this would add to our sort of national discourse about this is, frankly, with the dramatic spectacle of having him appear in public. But I do think that the broader point about pressure for impeachment has already sharply escalated just in the hour or so since Robert Mueller concluded his remarks. And there was a piece of the Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler's statement that really stood out to me. He said, given that Special Counsel Mueller was unable to pursue criminal charges against the president, it falls to Congress to respond to the crimes, lies, and other wrongdoing of President Trump, and we will do so. Now, Jerry Nadler has been very careful to adhere closely to what Nancy Pelosi has laid out on impeachment, which is essentially the idea that the president is goading them into this. He thinks it would be a political win for them. They would be handing the president re-election. They would be dividing the country unnecessarily. But this, to me, really feels like a significant step in the direction of impeachment. Cory Booker, who obviously is on the Senate side, is out calling it a moral imperative now. I think that idea is likely to snowball in the wake of what Robert Mueller said. I mean, he did not specifically say, hey, Congress, you make this decision, but it was written all over the remarks that he made today. And he was clear, finally, about what, his intentions were in laying out and not being able to charge the president and essentially saying this is out of our hands, the Department of Justice. This is up to you, the United States Congress. So, I think Congress is away this week for the Memorial Day recess, so we're sort of hearing from members one by one in a piecemeal way. But I think over the next couple of weeks, you're really potentially going to see the pressure build, and we're going to get a sense of whether or not these impeachment proceedings are ultimately inevitable. Andrea?
I wanted to come here to Jeremy Bash first because you were general counsel at House Intelligence, and it struck a lot of people in the last few weeks that you've got both because of the refusal of the president to testify, other witnesses not being available, people changing their story, Manafort and the problems that they had with him as a witness. So there are a lot of reasons why they could not reach conclusions about what did or did not happen.
That's correct, Andrea, including also the destruction of emails and other evidence that I cited in the report. But it's also the case, Andrea, that because of the regulations under which Robert Mueller was operating, the special counsel rules, very different from the independent counsel rules that govern Ken Starr and Lawrence Walsh for Iran-Contra fame, this whole thing transpired in a much different way than it might have. And I'm seeing some criticism of Robert Mueller on my Twitter feed, more than I have before after this statement, because this is, in a way, very frustrating to the resistance and to some Democrats who had hoped that Robert Mueller was going to get in there and get the truth about what happened with Donald Trump and his campaign in Russia. Not just the narrow question of whether crimes were committed, but, what were the moral and ethical obligations that the Trump team had when they were approached by those Russian operatives? What did they call the FBI? Was national security harmed? And the fact that Mueller is not able to speak to that, nor is he able to say clearly whether he believes Donald Trump obstructed justice, is really frustrating to a lot of people. And yes, people can say, well, it's over to you, Congress. But, your point about a select committee is a very interesting one. We don't have a select committee right now. What we have are disparate congressional investigations, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, and the Democrats have been unable to put a narrative in front of the American American public. They're being blocked. One of the key witnesses on obstruction is former White House counsel Don McGahn. He is going to fight tooth and nail testifying. So it's unclear whether they can get a narrative that drives to impeachment in front of the American public. And as we all know right now, there just aren't the votes in the Senate to convict the president, Andrea.
And Julia Ainsley at the Justice Department, Bill Barr probably has to feel relieved that at least the words that were spoken about him.
Anybody say hello in the chats?
You know, Attorney General has been fair about the way he's turned over the redacted.
I'm just hanging out listening to the news.
That said, the underlying message here, as
Trying to get a little bit of sleep.
Jeremy and others have been pointing out, is that the Justice Department is not being
Not
straightforward.
going so well.
Well, that's true, right? He said that William Barr acted in good faith when he decided, and whether or not there was unauthorized surveillance of members of the Trump campaign. I think subtly
Keeps
today,
making me reconnect.
and subtle is about as what fit in usual terms from Robert Mueller, is that he did say that this had a very important mission, that they were not, and this is not an advised investigation, they went out there to find something that was critical to our democracy, and they found something, which was systematic interference from a foreign government and from private internet people who were coming in to influence our election and our opinions via social media. We saw that in the indictment, so he wanted to emphasize that. Other things that have happened since his report that I thought were interesting that he emphasized was this idea that there is another process in order to find the president wrongdoing, that in order to investigate criminal wrongdoing by the president, it should be through the criminal justice system. That also seems like something that is going directly against what William Barr said when the Justice Department countless times has said that it is not the OLC opinion that caused the special counsel's office not to have an opinion and not to make a decision when it came to obstruction of justice. So seeing this through William Barr's eyes, you can take away some good things. He also said that there was nobody keeping him from testifying, so that relieves that burden from William.
I will be back on here. Check back in a few minutes. I will be back on here once I'm done my conversation with her. So, yeah. Got another fucking bug bite right here. Swelling up this whole area. Little fucking tiny bugs don't even leave a hole. It's just like suddenly you're itching and there's a swelling spot.